Thank you for joining me on the Sutherland Report. An absolute privilege to have your company. Now, continuing my political series, where I am presently interviewing Reform UK candidates, I'm delighted to bring on Michael Jordan. And Michael will talk about the constituency that he's standing on. We will go through our usual geography lessons. We've got another new map to show you, so I'm delighted to do that. Michael, welcome to the show. Lovely to see you. I'm just going to punch us in so we can see ourselves in greater glory. But Michael, thank you very much for your time. And I'm just going to go to our map straight away, and you can then tell. You're standing in the constituency of Wetherby, Easing and Wold. Have I got that correct?
Nearly. It's Wetherby and Easingwold. It's the two biggest towns, if you can call them towns, in the constituency.
Okay, brilliant. So using this map that has been a standard map, are you just above, would you say you're just above Leeds there?
Just literally above and to the right of Leeds, but it includes three of the Leeds Council constituency wards at council.
Brilliant. And then if we go here, we've got, I think Ripon is a good place of contact there. Would you say, sir?
It's on the border of Ripon and York. It just squiggles around and bypasses all the big places.
Right. So here we are.
There we are. Yes.
There we are. Brilliant. But it's very important to show that, very important to place it, because there are international viewers that grace me with their presence, and they're interested in what's going on. Michael, thank you again. Michael, why are you standing in the constituency? Why are you stepping forward to stand for to be presently the prospective parliamentary candidate for Reform UK in your constituency? Why are you standing to do that?
Basically, because first of all, it's largely a Conservative area, and there are a huge number of Conservatives who are completely disillusioned with the party. They've gone off-piste. Their policies are not the policies of the original Conservative Party. It's a very large rural area, and I am a councillor at North Yorkshire in a very rural ward consisting of 12 villages. So I well understand the issues that you get in hamlets of 20, 30 houses to small towns. But I have a ward of 1,000, which is on a par with some of the towns, villages in the constituency. I know the constituency well, and I'm Yorkshire born and bred in any case, so I spend a lot of my time cycling and motorcycling around there, so I do know the area. And in fact, my wife is actually in Tadcaster Community Choir, and Tadcaster does form part of that constituency and is one of the larger towns, because it is a constituency that consists of 6 reasonable sized towns and then over 60 villages and hamlets.
What are the concerns of people within the constituency? You've laid out a very important statement by saying it's very, very conservative, but they have gone off-piste. So combining that question with how they've gone off-piste, and then the concerns of the constituents and people that you are meeting on the street.
Well, it's been interesting, actually, and it's been a bit of a mindset and a little bit of a light bulb moment for me, simply because, as you can see from the map, it's close to Leeds, it's close to York, it's close to Ripon and Harrogate, but it's a rural area. And I've found in those rural areas that people have a great deal of concern about immigration. Now, that to me looked a little bit bizarre when I first discussed it with somebody, but he pointed out, this particular gentleman pointed out to me that in a nutshell, he can't get appointments. He can't get to see doctors. He can't get to see a specialist, particularly in Leeds, because the services there are being overwhelmed. The other issue is a huge area of the constituency are not on the gas network. They're also struggling with broadband facilities because, as you know, the whole world lives online now, more or less. We're doing this. If there are some parts of the constituency where we couldn't do this, not in a million years, and there's a lot of private roads out there, for instance, and where it's a private road, it's not been adopted by the council. It's very difficult for these internet companies that put down the cables and everything to actually do anything there, and it's expensive as well.
So there's a huge infrastructure issue there. But going back to what you were saying in regard to the concern over immigration, you are then talking about no, people can't get doctor's surgery appointments. What about and you name the towns. You also quite rightly, I know the area a little bit. You quite rightly lay out the countryside issues. What about we've got the strain on doctor's surgeries, etc. What about a strain on housing? What are the other infrastructure problems that are recurring? And other than, quite rightly, you're talking about the broadband, which of course, if people want to run businesses, they need that internet. So what else is going on that is straining facilities there?
Well, housing is definitely an issue, but it's an issue nationwide. Part of the constituency is in the national park, and there are very severe, strict rules on housing in such areas. To some extent, I quite agree with them, because obviously we need places to go and relax and enjoy ourselves and in our time out. But the simple fact of the matter is the amount of people, as a consequence of largely immigration, requiring houses has gone up, just rocketed. And in fact, there's other silly things that are actually impacted by this. I was at a council meeting not 6 months ago where there was concerns raised by some of the councillors around the sewage system and drainage. And one particular councillor, who shall remain nameless, did say that, well, we've got a lot of extra people around, and all these services need money. If you bring in 1 million people, you've got to bring in the services to go with them, and we haven't.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? If we look at London, of course, elsewhere, and our history in regard to building viaducts, building the waterways, canal systems in the past, and then if you take London, where the sewage system, the building, it's Victorian brickwork, etc.
Oh, yes.
So we're, no wonder.
Yeah, well,
and
I can give you another example of it, where literally down the road from me, they are replacing the railway bridge in my constituency at Barkston Ash. That railway bridge was built in Victorian times, and it was built with literally an arch of bricks, 4 bricks thick, and then filled with rubble, and that was it. And that's been there 120 years. It's taken 120 years to get round to improving that bridge.
Wow. Well, it also talks about the technology and the skill that we had at that time, and we can argue, that are we losing that? But we're going back to
cranes like they're using there right now.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you, Michael. So we're talking about the concerns of the infrastructure. What about law and order? What about opportunities for young people?
Well, that's two different stories. The law and order issue, we've got Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner Zoe Medcalf was starting to make inroads into the issues because it got a very poor Ofsted report, for want of a better word, and that as a consequence, that's all got to be dealt with. And the new mayor, who is a Labour guy, David, has got his work cut out sorting it out, because it's a largely rural area, and actually there's not many big main roads running through it. There's the A19, but that's about it now as regards education of young. I've not been getting that on the doorstep, which I'm surprised about, but because in my ward where I am a councillor, Carlton and Campbellsford and Carlton, there are issues because youngsters are struggling to get into Selby College. I've not heard that on the doorstep. I would imagine there is a problem, but obviously people out there in these areas, there's no buses, so they're obviously always going to be using a car of one sort or another, and they must have sorted it out, because I've certainly not been faced with any of that whilst I've been out there. Excuse me.
No, not at all. And of course, if there are no buses, that raises another question, because they've got to drive cars, and then the whole thing of fuel prices going up is then impeding that freedom. What about Michael? From your councillor position, where can waste be cut out? Where can savings be made? Because I know that is something on the Reform UK that's on their heart. But specifically in your area, if you've got a Labour mayor, is the police the guy that's overseeing the police? What party is he from? Are parties able to work together in these situations on all these issues?
They're going to have to. They're going to have to. And I know there was a bit of disappointment with the leader of North Yorkshire Council, because Carl Les is Conservative and he's the leader of the council. And he almost certainly hoped that Keane Duncan, the Conservative candidate, would have won that. They're going to have to learn to work with others. They're having to do that at North Yorkshire Council in any case, because they don't have a majority there. They're being propped up by some independents at North Yorkshire, because they don't actually have a majority. But they're also going to have to work, and I would, as the MP, have to work with Leeds City Council more. They've tended to avoid all that, but Leeds City Council, which is Labour, that once you're elected, and you've got the party politics out the way, you're there to help everyone. You're not there just to continue wrapping your own agenda all the time. And you've got to work together. And the Conservatives are going to have to do that.
When referring back to when you were saying they've gone off-piste,
yes,
what's the level of anger that you think that could you measure that within the traditional Tory voters there?
Well, the level of anger is quite high, and it's for the reasons are quite clear. We haven't done anything about immigration, which is now causing an issue, and taxes are ridiculously high, highest for 70 years, and it's got and that's got to the point where my state pension is now taxed because they haven't raised the thresholds, so I'm paying tax on my state pension. Now issues like that have been coming up all the time, but the issues that they've mostly been talking about is simply because of immigration. We have a situation whereby all the services are suffering. And the other problem that's occurring is because of the housing crisis, in that we're not building houses in some places, we're also getting small primary schools in rural areas closing, which is bizarre when you think that the population of this country is growing exponentially at the moment, and yet we're closing primary schools. You couldn't make it up.
No, I fully agree. So we'll talk about the infrastructure. Is there any other concerns when we talk about education getting into Selby College? That may be because population increase, etc. But what about jobs? Describe what the main, if there's any industry there, jobs, etc. What is the makeup of the constituency there?
It's very similar to Selby in that a lot of them commute into the bigger areas, York and Leeds, and that's a simple fact of life, because they're the big areas where there's going to be people working. So you get a huge amount of commuting. I mean, when I worked in Mirfield, so I left the Selby area every day to go to Mirfield in West Yorkshire, and there's a huge amount of that, and you can clearly see that from when I've been out in places like East Rigton and Collingham. You can see that you know, and people that I've spoken to, they're all working in places like Leeds and York. There is an element of people working in rural communities, obviously, because there's a lot of farming goes on, but the vast majority are commuting out.
Sorry, how are farmers finding things? Are they putting double glazing, as the wonderful Rob Kearney says of Bolsover? Are they being forced to put double glazing all over their fields? This whole subject of food security is regularly coming up. So what is their perspective on things?
That's an interesting one. I can talk more about that locally, to me, to be honest, because my ward, where I'm a councillor, is actually getting one of the biggest solar farms in the country, potentially the Helios project. And you don't, out in the rural area where the constituency is, Wetherbyandeasingwold, you can't put large solar farms simply because there's nothing there to plug into. All these infrastructures like this have to plug in, and they're all being plugged into Drax, to be honest, including and potentially even bigger solar farm at Howden, which was 2,800 acres if it goes ahead. So the farmland around is still farmland, and there isn't much. There is some appetite for doing solar farms and wind farms, but the biggest area for wind farms potentially is actually the Selby area. There's a funnel of wind blows through Selby area, and it was the previous Conservative MP Nigel Adams that kicked that into the long grass by various means. So infrastructure like that would have to be somewhere near a large power station, and that's how it is. It's this physical.
So you're raising there is an issue in regard to plugging all of that technology into the national grid then?
Yeah, so it is. There is a big new Eastern Link coming down from Scotland, but that's going to be off the coast, and that's going to come ashore at Fraysthorpe, just south of Bridlington. So that's not going to come anywhere near us. And the National Grid do want to run some new pylons. Can you imagine trying to run brand new pylons down the middle of the country now through farmers' fields and everything? They never get planning permission for that sort of thing now. That will be, you know, what's there's there, and everybody's used to it. But putting anything new in, that will be a totally different story.
Right, but that's why it's interesting to talk to Robert Bolsover. I know I'm mentioning his name again because there was this big infrastructure in regard to all this green technology that they're all trying to build. So when you're in a rural community like you are at times, and they're not then linked to, did you say, to gas system?
There's a lack of gas, even in my ward, in the constituency where I am, as well as a lot of parts of Wetherbyandeasingwold. They've never been on gas, so they're all either using LPG, wood burners, or oil. You know, there's a huge amount of them using oil, and you see the lorries running around delivering oil, which during one particular period when the price went through the roof, made it very expensive, because to fill your central heating tank up for the winter was 3 times what it used to be.
So in regard to the council, we've talked about there's councillors, of course, there's the member of parliament, there's someone in charge of the police. Where can some of this, and as you've said, if people don't work together, they need to be working together for the best of their constituency, of the people they're supposed to represent. Where do you see where management could get cut out? Do you think that the head of the councils and stuff like that, they're overpaid and all this? Do you think the salaries are ridiculous? Where can any savings be made?
Certainly, there's savings to be made in staffing terms, and that has happened with North Yorkshire Council, because people have left, gone to other authorities, and the council has whittled down in terms of numbers. The problem is that there's so many things now that they think has to be done. And there's a lot of form filling going on, but at the same time, things aren't getting done. Planning is a major issue. So making savings, it's how do you make savings as a council? One of the ways of doing it is to make sure your roads are in good order. And I have an issue, there's issues up in Easingwold, particularly with the state of the roads there. I was on one road leafleting, and I thought, I ain't taking my car down that road, not in a million years. And things have been let slide. There's technology out there to make things simpler. We must have saved money on salting, because let's face it, we don't have winters like we did back in the 50s and 60s. So there must be savings to have been made there. But it's also how we sort public transport out. I'm fairly confident that it could be sorted out, and I'm hoping that the new mayor bites the bullet and does sort that out, because you see buses running around the countryside with absolutely nobody on, and you think, why are they running that bus? There must be a different way of doing this. There's got to be a different way of doing this.
So do you mean rerouting the buses, finding out? Would that mean that you've got to go out there and do some research to find out?
Somebody's got to go out. Yes, so exactly. Somebody's got to go out there, do the research, find out what routes work, what routes don't, and what people should do. I mean, I well remember years ago, when I first became a councillor, going around, and you'd see people moving into the village that I live in, Sherburn in Elmet, just on the edge of the constituency. And they moved in, and they were moaning that there were no swimming pool, there were no this facility, there no that facility. And why didn't you check that out before you bought your house? Why didn't you do a bit of research? And if those are important to you, why have you moved here? And people don't ask them questions. A lot of people like to be remote. You see it if you watch Escape to the Country. You see that they want to be. It's a wonderful program, and it does highlight that people have to make the right decisions. It's not for everybody, because not everybody can dictate where they live. But if you hark back, and I'm really harking back here now. In the old days, businesses, particularly Roundtree and the rest of them, and there's a Maltings in Castleford that did this. When they wanted people to work for them, they built houses. They had the land and they built the houses, and so the staff were there. So you could actually get up at 5 to 8 and be at work for 8. There's none of that happens now, and there's no companies now actually do provide that sort of facility for staff. I well remember if you go, I think it's the big Hyundai factory. Everybody lives on site and everything. They can go out and do things, but everybody lives on site within the area. Transport costs are nearly nil. But, you move out into the countryside, I'm afraid you're going to have to learn to accept what you've got there. But the other problem that looms then is as they get older, the village gets older, then the children aren't there anymore, so there's no need for the primary school. But then there comes a point where they can't drive, and then they're stuck, completely stuck.
No, you're raising really, really important community issues. It's very. I'm interested what you just said about people moving in and going, "Where's the swimming pool? Where's this?"
Yeah.
What are sports facilities like? What are those kind of facilities like within the constituency? What are the needs?
Well, actually, Tadcaster's got a lovely sports centre, swimming pool facilities and everything. And Wetherby was about to get it, but isn't. And the Conservative recent the recent elections, council elections, the Conservatives said they are getting it. And then you see the newspapers say they are. I am amazed. Excuse me. I am amazed that Wetherby hasn't got proper full-blown swimming pool and leisure centre and facilities. Selby's got it. Selby's had it for years. Tadcaster is in the constituency and has a thriving pool and a thriving community there that use it regularly. There's nothing in Wetherby.
So is that something that you would wish to bring to Wetherby? Because it sounds though it's needed.
I would be, and I would go and be working with the council. It's Leeds City Council. I'd go and work with them and see what we can do to get it, because it makes you wonder if it's because it's currently a Conservative MP but a Labour City Council, that it makes you wonder if they're not actually working together. I don't know. I'm only speculating. Because they say they're going to get this, but they aren't, and that's the rub at the moment.
It's sorry, go on.
No, and you know, I mean, it's a fairly big town, is Wetherby, and it's certainly bigger than Tadcaster, so. And you'd think there'd be somebody could chip in and get their act together. I mean, Tadcaster's got one big plus in that it's got 3 large breweries there, so there's probably been help from them when it originally got built. But I'm sure if we had a whip round in Wetherby, we could organise this and get things going, because it does need it. It does need it.
No, and as a dear friend of mine explained to me a few weeks ago that, and I need to check this statistic out, that there is a statistic that suggests we either have 4 or 5 deaths a year in our country because people have drowned. Now, whether they can swim or anything else is another thing, but that raises another thing. And also, you know, if swimming sports centres, then people can get fitter, and then that means there's less strain on the NHS, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
What are so you would raise quite an important thing about trying to find a doctor's surgery. What about hospitals? What about that kind of infrastructure?
Well, I've said that you know, being a rural area, I wouldn't expect them to be building a new hospital, and it's the access to the current hospitals that is an issue. And there's Harrogate and Leeds is the main one. Obviously, there's the big hospitals there, and that's what I'm getting told.
Well, I think that there is this picture, and I have to say, when I'm talking to various people, there's a picture nationally. So, at this point, Michael, how can people reach you? How can they reach you via email, etc.?
Oh, they can reach me by email. The simplest thing to do is I want to see I want to talk to my reform candidate, the reform candidate. The simplest thing to do is to go on the reform website and then go to find my PPC. Click on that and it will bring me up. It brings a picture up of me, a bit of a bio of me, and it brings my contact details up. And that's the simplest way of contacting me, and that's what people have been doing. I do have a personal email address. I'm also on Facebook, so if you're Facebook savvy and you like having a whinge, I'm on all the Grumbler groups and the forums, Easingwold Forum, Weatherby Grumbler, Tadcaster Grumbler, Grumblers, all sorts. So you can have a good grumble there. But the simplest way to contact me if you want me to come and see you is quite simply to email me, and that's all through the Reform website.
No, it's excellent that you're on there, because I think one of the other things that I'm finding talking to people is this whole thing of mental health, and people being able to talk and express an opinion and their concerns.
Yeah.
I've always thought was very, very good for one's mental health.
Yeah.
The next thing is seeing that enacted. Michael, how are you? What is your ground game at the moment? You've just said you've been knocking on doors, you've been leafleting, you've got quite a constituency to get round. So, what's the plan?
Oh, well, the plan has gone better than I'd hoped in a way, because my plan was to initially get a leaflet out, and so that everybody was aware that I exist and that Reform exists and what Reform are. And I literally just finished delivering that leaflet when His Lordship Rishi Sunak MP called the election. So that was brilliant timing, because it means I don't have to do another leaflet. So thank you. That saved me money. On the negative side, I've had to cancel my holiday and move it to September. But and now it's street stalls, door knocking, getting out the boards and going and see if anybody wants me to go and see them. I'm seeing some tonight. I'm also tonight going up to Richmond, because obviously I'm talking with the other candidates, the other PPC candidates. We're swapping ideas and thoughts, and Lee Taylor is standing against Rishi Sunak, and he's just out of the army. He's relatively new to this doing politics, so I said I'd go up and support him, which is what I'm doing tonight. And it's all systems go for us all. And I having no leaflet to deliver means I can react if somebody wants me to go and see them. That's fine, no problem.
So that's excellent. So you've got a group meeting tonight. You're going to be going up to Richmond, as you say, because that is Rishi Sunak, the president. Well, he may be out. The Prime Minister of the UK.
Until tea time, I think. That's until tea time.
Right.
Because then they're not MPs.
Right. Brilliant. So is there any other hustings that you've got organised, or you hope to?
I'm not organising any hustings. I'm hoping others are. And I do know of one being organised in Weatherby. But I myself am going to hold some more meetings. I have held a series of meetings in the big towns and the small town. So my plan is I do a mass email to all my supporters. So if you want to know what I'm doing, the best way of doing it is go on the Reform website, either join or put yourself down as a supporter of the party, and then you will get regular updates from me. And you can then roll up to whatever meetings I have. I'm definitely holding another one in Easingwold soon, and I will be holding one in Aldwark, which is there's a number of people there want to see me again. At these meetings, I am keeping them relatively informal. I just want to pick their brains, ask them, what issues they've got. I am to introduce myself and seeing what help I can get, because I am getting a lot of help here, there, and everywhere, which you need. There's no way I could deliver 20,000 leaflets on my own. So, but what I have been doing is I've let various teams do the main towns, and then myself and my campaign manager, a gentleman called Colin Heath, we've been doing all the little villages and going around, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've found some cracking pubs. I have to say, I found some.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, and it's also in the pubs like that, it's a lovely meeting place.
Yes, I've had all my meetings in pubs, not because I'm a massive beer fan, because I am, but simply, but you can't drink and drive, obviously. So I'm up at Easingwold. I must admit, I've dragged Colin up there once, and he drove, so I was able to have a drink or two. But yes, the thing is, there are public houses where people can meet and talk. And all of them have the pubs. I've been up and asked them if I'm all right to go there, and virtually all of them have said, yeah, no problem, crack on. And so it's a simple, easy venue because you can have a drink and a chat and chill the fat and get something off your chest, because they've all wanted to get something off the chest, particularly around the Conservatives. Because one of the reasons I'm in the Reform rather than Conservative is because the Conservatives have changed their policies so much. They're just alien to me. Taxing people to the hilt is alien to me. And it's just letting all these immigrants in. We're not saying no immigration. There's about 400,000 leave, between 300,000 and 400,000 leave the country on a yearly basis to go off to Australia, New Zealand, or wherever, Canada as well. So, others can come in and replace them effectively. That's what net zero is about. And the other net zero is obviously we are throwing a huge amount of money. It's all these different wonderful green projects, which aren't that green. One thing that really frustrates me and really annoys me is if I may take time out to talk about this, is cars, these electric cars. I'm sorry, but to make an electric car consumes between 3 and 4 times as much, produces 3 or 4 times as much CO2 as making an ordinary car, simply because the effort involved in making the batteries. And you have to remember as well, a simple fact for you here, the Lotus, which was Colin Chapman's car and design, the Lotus, when it came out in the 60s, weighed just over 0.5 ton. Its modern equivalent is 5 times heavier. How is that being green? How is that remotely being green?
Well, you could then argue that one of the reasons why we have so many potholes is because of that weight as well.
Well, that's not one I particularly wanted to go down, but yeah, possibly you could argue that, yeah, which is why everybody's having to drive around in Discos and Range Rovers and the like, yeah.
But well, the other thing is, I mean, these issues are very important. They are fundamentally important, because we've touched on food security. This is fundamentally important. And if people are not in a position to heat their own homes, well, that doesn't need any explanation, does it? Michael, is there any other concerns? So retail politics, what about, as you've said, you've talked about people having to travel to the bigger towns for work. Access in regard to public transport is a huge concern. Access to be able to get a doctor's surgery appointment is a huge concern. You've talked about the infrastructure. If people are running a business, then they're going to need the internet, etc., etc. And of course, LGP, gas, liquid petroleum gas prices going up. That hasn't helped. What about business rates for small businesses? How is that affecting people in a very negative way?
Naturally, is what needs to happen is that if you've got a small business, the chances are you want a small industrial unit. I run a large international car club, and we've always struggled to get decent premises. We have got some in the middle of Whitley Bay, in the middle of a housing estate, believe it or not. But what should happen is that business rates should be they're just part of the deal. They should be sorted for small businesses, rate relief to keep them going. Well, when they're first starting out. But the other aspect of it is a lot of these places, a lot of the industrial units could be built by councils, and councils could adjust the rent accordingly to help them, because a lot of councils get grants for doing this sort of thing. So if you've got an area where you can put up some small industrial units for enterprising small businesses that are just getting going, and then give them good rent reductions as well as rates, just to get them started, because that's one of the problems. Unless they've won the lottery, they're limited in funds. They'll have to mortgage their house up to the hills, and that doesn't help, because it makes you feel insecure, and then your business suffers. So if businesses had the certainty, it's the lack of certainty. And going forward, for medium-sized and larger businesses, one of the other issues is that businesses have a 25-year plan, and that is what they need. They don't get that in this country because the government changes every 5 years or every 2 years. So you can understand, believe it or not, one of the reasons why Dyson's moved to China was there's an absolute bloody certainty about what the policies are going to be going forward, so they can plan ahead. They can work out what they're going to be doing in 25 years' time, because these businesses have to do it. I worked for Dow Chemicals. They took over a chemical site that I was on, and we were in. Well, the site was involved in pharmaceuticals, and they ended up moving out because and they sold the company to Dr. Reddy's, and part of the reason was they just couldn't get the hang of, planning, because they couldn't be sure what the next government was going to do down the road. So they just said, blow this, and they just packed in with pharmaceuticals and went back to making tons and tons of PVC, etc., which they've always done.
And that raises the question, isn't it, about us? Instead of being wealth distribution, we're trying to create wealth, and this is the mindset that needs to be changed.
Yes, these governments that for the last 20 years have not been remotely interested in manufacturing, and that really annoys me, and it annoys the Reform Party. We move the manufacturing abroad because they think that's going to make the air cleaner. It doesn't make the air cleaner, because they're going to be making them over there instead of over here. 90% of all toys sold in this country are now made in China, because China think, well, they want these things. We'll make them if you don't want to make them. And we'll end up being a country that's just not got any income coming in. The only way this country can create wealth is if the manufacturers in this country sell something abroad. I hark back to my days when, back in the 60s, Ford I'm deeply involved in Mark I Cortinas. Fords sold Cortinas. They were manufactured in this country and they were sold all over the world. And in 4 years, the Mark I Cortina, they produced 1.25 million cars. Can you imagine how much income that brought into this country? And then British Leyland were doing even better, because the British Leyland car, the Morris 1100 and Austin 1100, that was actually a bigger seller. Can you imagine how much wealth was being brought into that country? We are slowly turning into Pleasure Island. End of. We won't have any manufacturing the way things are going.
And you wonder if that's all planned, but that could be a subject for another day. Michael, could you please give out your details again? Tell people how they can reach you.
Yes.
And thank you. So over
simply
to you.
Contact me via Reform UK website. Find my PPC, and then click on Wetherbyandeasingwold, and that brings up all my details.
Michael, thank you. And I just ask you very kindly, share this etc. And we'll get the word out. Can I just thank you very much for joining me and for your insights and your passion and your enthusiasm for your constituency, but the history of it. You understand the area, and
Yes.
that is why this is important. That's why you're stepping forward to stand, and no one can argue with that. You actually understand, that. So thank you, sir. Don't go away. I'll say goodbye to you officially on the other side, but I will just play us out. Just thank everyone. It's much appreciated, as I'm having fun pressing the wrong button. But there we go. All right. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.